Episode 24, Murphy and Milan Heroes. My father, Tom Murphy, was very proud of his Irish heritage and was cognizant of the large number of Irish descent military heroes throughout history and taught us about them. He told his kids that at that time, soon after World War II, the largest number of Congressional Medal of Honor winners were of Irish descent, and there were a similar large number of Britain's Victoria Cross winners who were Irish, also according to Dad. Something came to me while listening to a wonderful Irish patriot song sung by Anthony Carnes. One thing that I got from my father that my kids did not get from me is an appreciation of the sacrifice of lives for the Irish state throughout hundreds of years of Irish history. In other words, there is something beyond God, beyond family, that deserves the sacrifice of one's life, and that is one's country. It's not easy for me to feel that patriotism for the USA today, with its state-imposed, untrammeled holocaust of 52 million preborn children and abortion. I love my country, but not my government. My uncle Neil Murphy, one of Dad's older brothers, was a Marine drill sergeant during World War II. When he came home from the war, I got parts of his military uniform. He gave me his Marine lapel insignia, some medals, and a wide black leather belt. This was a big deal for me because, unlike other neighborhood fathers, mine was too old to serve. Other kids had their father's military swag, and Uncle Neil's stuff made me part of the World War II victory. Neil was a confirmed bachelor and quite a character. He played pro football for the Providence Steamrollers before the NFL was started. He also played football for New York University while he studied chiropractic in Manhattan. My father told me that he was a quote-unquote ringer for NYU. That meant they illegally paid him for playing. Around 1917, Neil and the eldest Murphy brother, Mike, then in their late teens, enlisted. They fought with the American Expeditionary Force and fought with France against the Imperial German Army. I think they were attached to the 26th Division, the Yankee Division of the National Guard from New England. The 26th was the first complete U.S. Army division to arrive in France in 1917. The unit fought in 6 campaigns. 43 years later, with no war going on, I joined the Army through the same Yankee division. I do not know which battles Neil and Mike were part of, nor whether they were injured, but both came home alive. Neil re-enlisted for World War II, as I mentioned before, this time in the Marines, when he was over 40 years old. I understand the Army turned him down because of his age, so he went to the Marines. The Marines needed drill instructors, and that was Neil's specialty. He was a real tough old bird. My Uncle Neil and Mike were 2 Murphy heroes. The Murphy families, the Milans, my mother's family, the Milans from Galway, had heroes too. My grandfather on my mother's side was George Milan from Milford. My mother, Helen Milan, was born in Milford also, and the family were parishioners at St. Mary's Church. St. Mary's Old Cemetery holds the grave of the Milans and my mother, my father, and my sister Maureen. Some were American Civil War heroes, like brothers Michael, John, and Thomas Milan. They were my great-grand-uncles. Brother John starved to death at Andersonville Prison, an infamous Confederate prison camp in Georgia. On Brother Michael's gravestone, born in 1824, is listed the Galway birth town, Mount Bellew. Michael had a suppurating gunshot wound from the war that never healed. He returned to his family in Southborough and years later died of the wound. Without today's antibiotics, unhealed, festering wounds slowly killed the Civil War veterans. Thomas, too, was wounded in the Civil War. These Irish immigrant Milans must have come at least a generation before my grandfather, George Milan. He was born on April 25th, 1876. George's mother and father, my great-grandparents, were Ellen Cahill Milan and Patrick Milan, born about 1850. According to George's birth certificate, Patrick was born in Ireland. War was really hell for the Milans. So there are American war heroes on both sides of my family. However, not recently. Gary spent 2 years in the Army during the Korean War. but never left the mainland. He was a swimmer for the U.S. Army swim team. I enlisted in the National Guard for a 6-year stint, 6 months active duty, and then 5.5 years in the reserve. There was a military draft when Gary and I served. I know I chose the least dangerous road to fulfill that military duty. The current generation of Murphys have not had the draft or any military service. In my opinion, military service is beneficial to a young man. It taught me to obey without question. I decided for a preset period of time I would endure military discipline. When I was released from my enlistment back into civilian life, if I were able, I would never put myself in that totally subservient position again. Since then, I have always questioned authority. I also lost any youthful idea that war is noble. War is awful, and even training for war is awful, but sometimes, unfortunately, necessary. Thank you for viewing or listening to my podcast episode. I really appreciate it. If you liked it, and if you so choose, I ask you to send a good review and perhaps refer friends who might be interested in this podcast series. Again, my thanks.